you can homestead your property in a land trust. And in fact, the big, well, number one, let's talk about what homestead is for the people who don't live in Florida yet, because I think everybody's moving here. But the homestead is your primary residence. Now, in Florida, if your homestead is under a half an acre inside city limits or less than 160 acres outside city limits, it is protected 100% against creditors. So if you go bankrupt, that property is not an asset that the trustee can sell to satisfy and pay off your other creditors. If you are sued for $20 million and you have a 6-acre estate in Palm Beach County on the ocean worth $100 million, they cannot come and take that estate from you to satisfy their $20 million judgment. There's a reason O.J. Simpson did that whenever he was sued. So that's the big important part of homestead in Florida. And that's why so many people very wealthy people love to come here and buy very large homes. They pay cash, they buy them, and now they know that no matter what they get sued for, wherever it may be, no one can come to Florida because the state law controls that and take that homestead away from them. So that's why homestead is so important. Another reason that homestead is so important in Florida is because under the Constitution and under the statutes, you get special tax benefits for real property tax. For instance, if your property is increasing in value 10, 20% a year, it is capped in the state of Florida because it's your homestead. So that value, while it may have gone up 20% year over year, the county property appraiser can only increase your value by 3% at most. So they cap it. So it's 3% or the rate of inflation, whichever is less. When the rate of inflation was lower than 3%, they could only go up, the 1.4%. But once we start going over 3% inflation, they were capped at the 3%. You have a similar exemption for commercial property at 10%, but for homestead, it's capped at 3%. Plus, in addition to the capping at 3%, you also get to take $50,000 to $75,000, depending on the tax that's being assessed, off of the valuation of the property. So if your house is worth $100,000, you may get to take $75,000 off. So now they're only taxing you at $25,000 instead of $100,000 value. That's another benefit of the homestead across the board. Another benefit for the homestead is that, I just lost it. But it is there are other tax benefits with the homestead that you get in Florida. So that's why everybody loves their homestead. The porting. Whenever you move from one homestead to another, or whenever you sell that homestead, you have up to 3 years to port your savings. So if you have $100,000 or $300,000 of savings from your current homestead, and then you move into another property, maybe you downsize, you can port that $300,000 that a value reduction from your current homestead to your new homestead. And you've got up to 3 years to do that. So let's say you move out of the homestead and it just loses homestead protections. You turn it into a rental. So now the taxes go up, the valuations go up, everything goes up on that property, but you had $300,000 worth of depressed value saved on it. 2 years later, you go, okay, now I'm going to buy another house. You can now port that $200,000 savings that you had to the new property and move into it. Let's say you buy a condo out at the beach and it's a $300,000 condo. Now you take $200,000 off of it, off the valuation. From the get-go, you're only paying tax on $100,000 value. So this is why the homestead's so important and why people love to preserve it. So the big question we get is, what if I put my homestead into a land trust? Do I lose that protection? And that's a big question because typically whenever you change title to property, any exemptions that you had are potentially lost. There's a good chance you could lose all the exemptions and all the tax savings you had simply because you changed the title on the property. So going from your name and into a land trustee as trustee of a land trust is technically a change of title. However, under the land trust agreement, you reserve the right to reside on the property. And under state law, simply retaining that right to reside on the property as your primary residence is enough to retain your homestead. So what often happens, it happens a lot, we run into times where it goes from a person's name and into a land trust, and then the property appraiser says, okay, well, we're changing the valuation right now off the bat. And we have to go in and argue with them. And we have special language we put in the deed that specifies that the beneficiary has retained the right to reside on the property as their primary residence. They've retained the right to the homestead. And that is used to prove to the property appraiser that there was not a change in status for homestead purposes. So therefore, it should not be revalued. The cap should not go away. The exemption should not go away. All these savings that you have stay on the property. And sometimes it takes some time to make that argument and get it through. Other appraisers, property appraisers, it just depends on the county. Some are very understanding. Others, this is a lot of money for that county, so they fight over this. So it just depends on the county, but sometimes that argument's easy, sometimes it's tough. But what we recommend instead, to save that having to argue with the appraiser at a later point, when you buy the property, take it straight into the trust off the bat so that your homestead is reestablished inside the homestead right then, and save that argument with the property appraiser later, so we don't have to make that argument later by moving your homestead into the land trust a year or two later.